Hello, everyone. This is Conversations from the Alcove from the Lucille Lortel Theater. My name is Caridad Svich. I'm a playwright and I'm the artistic director of the new play development program here at the Lortel, which is a theater company in New York City. I am beaming in from New York City, the land of the nape. And I will give you a brief audio description. I am a fair-skinned person with auburnish hair that's been pulled back at the moment. I have glasses that are sort of tortoiseshell, red lipstick, a black shirt, button down with a collar, and I'm also wearing fake pearls on my black shirt. And then behind me is a white background, a wall, ceiling, and you might see in a corner a lamp. A tall standing lamp at one side that if you look really closely. Yes, and in today's episode, we have the wonderful, talented playwright, Jennifer Maisel, who will introduce themselves in terms of where they're from and all those good things. But I'm going to start with just a brief introduction. If I can pull it up on my end. This is from their website, so you can always look at it there. But here we go. The daughter of an adhesives manufacturer, which I didn't know, and a teacher, Jennifer Maisel grew up in a picture-perfect Long Island suburb. I also didn't know that, where she found a dead man in her driveway. What? Okay, which may account for one reviewer's assessment of her writing as, quote, sort of David Lynch on estrogen. One of her plays, Last Seder, premiered off Broadway with Gabby Hoffman, Greg Mullavey, and Sarah Winkler, and has had productions all over the country and abroad. Jennifer's play, 8 Nights, was developed with Berkshire Playwrights Lab, Bay Street Theater, Playmakers, Moving Arts, and Antaeus. It went on to win 9 coveted Ovation Awards in Los Angeles and 1 for Best Playwriting. The play was also part of a nationwide fundraiser, and it opened in the fall of 2023 at Detroit Public Theater. Yes, yeah. Fairly recently, given the state of everything. She's written many other wonderful plays. I've had the privilege to publish some of them with No Passport Press. So I'm very honored to have Jennifer here. Jennifer, you want to tell us places about where you're beaming in from and all the good things?
I'm Jennifer Maisel, I'm playwright. I am beaming in from Los Angeles, which is originally the land of the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Kizh, and Chumash peoples. Hopefully I got that close to right. And I'm sitting, if you want a visual description, I'm also fair-skinned, I have dark hair, also tortoiseshell, dark tortoiseshell glasses. I am sitting in my office and behind me a whole bunch of posters of my plays and some red filing cabinets, and I am wearing black because that is what we do. so that's where I am. But yes, originally from Long Island. I didn't know you didn't know that.
I did not know that. I don't know why because I think you've been in Los Angeles so long, I just assumed you were from LA. But you're not. You're not from LA. You're from Long Island, and I had no idea. So that's like amazing. And I'd love to hear more about that when we get to it. I always start these conversations with a question about the climate crisis. How is the climate crisis affecting, obviously it's affecting all of us, but how is it affecting you, particularly as a playwright, and how you're thinking about making work, and also perhaps the subject matter of what you're addressing in your writing?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, especially in the last few years, just the everyday of how like our let's say Los Angeles weather has changed, and the way we've had floods in our yard, and suddenly it's like this isn't I didn't come to LA for the weather. I kind of actually have more of like an East Coast weather feel, and people kind of rag on me because it rains and I get happy that it's raining. But on the other hand, it's disturbing because we're not set up for that, and I haven't attacked it enough in my work yet. I don't think. I think it's covering, but I think certainly there was this weird feeling. So I was like, the grid is going to go down, and we're going to have theater. The grid's going to go down because of the climate crisis, and then the grid went down, but the grid did speed up, but we had the pandemic. And I'm a little bit. I think I get fearful about the climate crisis because of who we are as artists, but also like for my child, because how do we put the brakes on this, and then how do I write something that maybe could, like, I suppose actually always occurs in my writing. How do I write something? What would it be that I would write that make people do one small thing? Maybe that's it. It's like one small thing. And I
yeah, totally.
I wish I had answers for it.
Yeah, I think one of the difficult things actually about writing with an acknowledgement of this crisis that we're in, and also, part of our jobs as writers often is to project into the future, with our work. And so it's very hard to predict. It's very hard to predict where things are headed. But also I was thinking, even just something as simple as writing seasonally, for example, like you're writing a scene and you think, this in a very practical way, like the scene is set in the spring, blah, blah, blah. And suddenly you realize, oh, wait a minute. What could that mean? Right? Like there's no reliability around weather, depending on if you're writing something geographically specific. There used to be a time when you would say, oh, it's set in the winter, these are the patterns that happen, these are how the people behave in that winter season. I'm writing a play where that's happening, and I can incorporate that into the writing. And now it's like you do that and you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. It could be 80 degrees in the winter, it could be, so I think that
like snow in LA, you know what I mean, like that we're headed, we're headed there. And then it also makes me think of having had production of plays that take place in the East Coast, but having had these productions in LA, and like trying to explain to the costume designer why people need coats.
Right.
And they're like a light little jacket. I'm like,
no, they need a coat. Yeah.
And now, I don't know. I mean, I keep thinking like, we live mid city, and I kind of every once in a while I'm like, am I going to be oceanfront?
Right.
Right. And I think there's a little bit of like, that way you get through the day by kind of being in like constant denial that like an earthquake could tear us apart tomorrow.
Right.
And those would probably be the characters I would write.
Right. No, I hear you. I mean, it's just it's that, and it's also, in terms of how you write, but also it's about the materials, right, that you're thinking about in terms of production. As writers, we design the show in our head, right, partly. And so often it's also about like, oh, well, I mean, it makes me think a lot about like, if I'm thinking of writing a big scene with a lot of stuff in it, spectacle wise, I start to think about like, oh, is that going to be like polluting that? You know what I mean? Like thinking about how the mechanics of what you're making is actually going to affect the environment. And it's something we as writers have some responsibility because we lay it down, we lay the foundation down. And so I also think that we have some power there to kind of affect like how something's done.
Printing drafts. Like I don't print drafts the same way anymore. And I don't, and how we work off of iPads and computers, like when we're just doing a cold read and things like that, where I used to look at my Xeroxing bill. Like I don't have a Xeroxing bill anymore. But I haven't attacked it specifically in a play yet. I'm sure it's going to come.
Yeah.
And I think it's in the air. Like I think I write things now that can be saved very simply. The last few things in particular, and I think that's a combination of what could we coming out of the pandemic, like if we are, like what we could do and how theater could exist, and like, can I write things where people don't need to touch, and can I write things where there's a flexibility in staging, and it could be online, and it could be in person. And I think that also kind of dovetails into the like, there's not going to be a lot of waste on making this production happen.
Right, right.
You know?
Totally hear you. Speaking of this pandemic that we're in, Yellow Wallpaper 2020 2.0, which is a play that we've supported through an Alcove commission. And when this airs, it will have passed, but was part of our digital reading series. And so I wanted to know, obviously, I can imagine where it might have come from. But if you could talk about the genesis of the piece and also tackling how did, it's interesting because I don't think that the Gilman is on everybody's lips. Do you know what I mean? Like it's suddenly, let me think about Yellow Wallpaper today. You know what I mean? I don't think it's like the hot book that people are thinking about. So I always, how did Gilman come into your brain? Like, and you wanted to interact with it, but also pursue your own thing. And and how did the play come to be?
So Gilman came into my brain when I was in college, and not through Yellow Wallpaper, but through a novel of hers called Herland, which I'm just saying I have dibs on adapting it as a play or musical at some point, but I still haven't figured my way in yet. And it is about three male explorers turning the century who stumble on this utopian society that's all women, and who've been like reproducing for 2,000 years through like parthenogenesis. That has to do with the kind of cult of motherhood that was going on at the time, and how they would know they were going to keep being pregnant because they would start experiencing this kind of ecstasy. And so these three men, it's all narrated by one of the men, and one of them kind of integrates into the society and stays. One of them is kicked out because he tries to rape one of the women, and this guy who's our narrator marries one of the women and takes them back to our world. And there's a sequel called With Her in Our Land. And so I'm like, Act 1, Act 2. But then I read Yellow Wallpaper, and it's always, it's interesting. It was lost for like 50 or 75 years. And rediscovered, which kind of pegged it, like I think in the late 70s, early 80s. So kind of pegged Gilman as this foremother of feminism. And like, I cannot get over how brilliant this story is. Because the short story, and it's it takes you like on the journey as you read it into like you're with her the entire way into the whole disintegration of her mind. And I just, when COVID hit, and here we were like stuck in our homes, and people were going literally insane, and it kept kind of resonating with me. Like this is Yellow Wallpaper. This is this way, and also just what was going on with women kind of carrying labor in their home. And then I had applied to go to Dow at Dow House, which is the West Coast estate up in Danville, California. And you get to spend right there, like there's this like huge house, and all his land. They were only out there for about 7 years, and all his land is like this historic park now. There's a big house. There's like a little library. There's a theater in a barn, in what used to be a barn, and you get this office in the trunk room, which was his wife Carlotta's like place where she put her like Louis Vuitton luggage, and it's just you. And then you're staying at this like monastery about 15 minutes away. And so up this hill, so what ended up happening to me is I got tapped for it, and I literally got up there. I think it was like the day my second vaccine kicked in. And so first of all, I hadn't been out of my house in almost a year, and then I was up in this place. It was still very quiet, like it's still very isolated. They weren't having many tours going through, and monastery. Like I think I was the only person staying there most of the time. Then there are these friars, these retired friars who live there, but they're not kind of associated. And they feed you breakfast, they feed you dinner, they hand you like this little box lunch, and you go up to the house and work, and it's amazing. You can totally do it, but and then they have this library of all things O'Neill, which is where the part came out of like O'Neill and finding out that Carlotta takes all of O'Neill's manuscripts for him, and things from that space ended up in the play. And there was a woman who, so there's an artistic director of the O'Neill Festival. He had a friend who was an opera singer who like needed to rehearse but couldn't do it in her apartment because it was too much. And so she was up there some days in the barn, like in the barn theater, singing. It was beautiful, and also drove me insane because it was like the same thing over and over and over again. And so that went into the script. So it was kind of this. I really had no idea how I was going to pull it off. You ever had that? Like you say, like I'm going to write a play about this, and then like you just don't know how to write that play. And so I kind of went deep into the story, and I read the story like 50 times, and I just kept kind of following her, the structural lead for it. But yeah, that's how that came out.
That's how it happened. Oh my heavens! How do you position this play in relationship to your other plays, or do you?
I think I do this thing where I write a play, and then the next play is some sort of response to that in like an opposite way. Like, okay, so I've written, I mean, 8 Nights is the one that's been most recently produced. I have a couple of plays in there. Like after 8 Nights, I wrote this kind of bizarre domestic comedy called Better, about a woman who invites this, and this is actually like a real thing. They're people called family architects, and they come into your home and they tape everything that's going on, and they try to change the dynamic of your home. That seemed like a nightmare, so I had to actually write a play about it. But 8 Nights is a drama, and then this was like a hard comedy, and then right as the pandemic hit, they started working on two alternating like it's like Spalding Grade meets love letters, like it's alternating monologues, and it's over the course of their relationship. And so I kind of feel like I've always had this penchant for monologues, but never heard written like the monologue play, the play, and third person and this group are kind of moving towards that. I mean, one more place like a one-person play with this kind of exciting other character. And by the way, Amelia Workman, who did the reading, and directed by Jackson Gay, who's also amazing. So I just want to talk about that. But I think, in certain ways, Yellow Wallpaper fits in my contract because it's how I play with language and wanting to play with theatricality and do something different with form than I'm used to doing to make it keep that exciting for me. And then also kind of not all of my plays deal with Jewish issues, but like the anti-Semitism and the racism that I do that, I think that's something that several of my plays have addressed. And so there's a social issue that comes in. And I think I just respond. It's like I don't want to do the thing I just did. I never want to do the thing I just did.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I hear you. Yeah.
Okay,
You're,
realize.
yeah,
But like after 8 nights, I wasn't gonna write something else that was depressing.
you'll write a horror story. Have you ever done horror, by the way? Have you ever done horror or sci-fi
Well,
or?
I mean, yeah, no, but like, I mean, Yellow Wallpaper is a horror story, right? So
Right.
it
Yes. I mean,
is.
I mean more like, like body horror or like, you know what I mean? Like going into like really extreme stuff. Have you
It's
ever
the
done
one
that?
I can't watch either. Like it's like really the one thing that I can't. I can't watch a horror movie. I have nightmares for years.
Yeah.
And zombies. Zombies are the other thing that really.
Okay.
You want to scare me? Be a zombie.
Okay.
You
Fair enough.
Walking Dead.
Now I know. Now I know. Right. Zombies are the ones. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I do think that there's a little burgeoning movement of playwrights that are writing horror plays.
Mhm.
And it's kind of becoming quite popular. And so I keep wondering if that's gonna. I'm not saying it's going to take over, but I'm just saying that that was not usual. I think we've had a long time where people weren't focusing on that genre at all. So I think there is something about the pandemic that is also. I mean, it feels natural, right? Do you want to be like, oh, it's hard. I want to deal with the monsters in the world, and the monsters that are at our door, to quote Mike Davis, but also, um, the feeling of being kind of, taken over by something. So illness or disease or pathogen or whatever. So I think it's an interesting genre metaphorically, to deal with this time. But I'm just fascinated because I for a while in the field there was people would say who's writing the genre play, and horror would always be mentioned, and then there'd be crickets. And right now it feels like there's a whole swath of people sort of focused on the genre, which is like really, I think, kind of exciting, and who knows what will come of it. I want to, this is a little bit more about you and your writing, but I wanted to, and maybe you may or may not have an answer for this, but um, how do you look at yourself? You've been writing for a long time. So I think this is different from somebody that just wrote a play. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I think that, how do you view yourself, your baby, when you were a baby playwright, as
Mhm.
to now? Like, what have you learned? What kind of changed? What are, maybe it's concerns, maybe it's form? Like, yeah.
Okay, so that's a good question. I feel like I'm more, this kind of interesting thing about, here we are, we're writers well over 40, just put it that way. And I feel like my work is like more masterful than it's ever been, like my writing, like I can do it. But I think when I was younger, I felt like freer and I had all the time in the world to fill notebooks and, play. And I think I'm always kind of playing a little with form. So it's interesting to me that the ones that I feel like played with form the most are the ones that haven't been produced, like Mall Baby, you know, or really that we were at Playwrights Center doing that.
Yeah.
And um, and I don't know whether it's just that there wasn't the distraction level that there is now. Like there wasn't social media, there wasn't 2 million things to do. Also, like when I was younger, I you know didn't have a child. There's things I could do. But but so like my I think sometimes I think my writing became stronger, like with the acknowledgement that my time was less, my experimentation became
Yeah.
less. That freedom of playing or having to juggle many more projects now than I did then, or just money gigs that take up different amounts of time, whatever that is. But I came out to LA to work with pageant, And I came out as a student of Padua 1 year, and then 2 years later came back and kind of like, I don't know, this one with a kind of other plane of like helping out but not being a lead playwright. And that was revelatory to me because I had been in New York, was at NYU, I was doing my master's, and I was it was like NYU was like head and structure and Padua was art. And that was, when I moved out to LA, I was like, I'm gonna move out to LA for 6 months and just work with these people, with like Mary Bendick and Leon and all these people. And then I've been here for like decades, you know, and then I think that writing exercise, and no one did that. And Irene, and you know, and she was the opposite. But that was kind of a thing that I think I miss sometimes, just that playing, that, you know, and I don't tend to do it I'll do it like in a group, but like I don't tend to do it for myself the way I should. You know,
Yeah.
you know, your workshop then too, when I wrote Birds, and
Yeah.
And that was like, all of that writing is just, it's so deep. And I miss that. And I think it's something that I'm kind of looking forward to finding a way back in. But I think when I was writing Yellow Wallpaper, I was like in it because I was alone, and I was like, this is my prompt, which is this story. And I was like, I have to have a first draft of this play. And then so I was kind of, you know, I was obsessed. There's very little internet up there, and there's very little other, you know, many fewer distractions, and I could like feel it in my body. I don't know, this way, like when you're working towards the end and you're like at this speed of it, and you're like, now, you know, now I know I have it. Now I can go back and make it make sense.
Right.
So the things that change, like I feel like in some ways it's time for me to like go back and read my early plays and see what they were. I haven't done that in a long time. You know?
Yeah.
How bad were they? Were they good? Were they this? But I used to use a lot of monologues in plays, like, and now I'm writing more monologue.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, some things have persisted.
Yeah. No, I sometimes I started to do this endeavor, and I stopped myself, but I wanted to there's some of my early plays that are not digitized, you know, because they were written on typewriter. Remember typewriters? Okay, so anyway,
there's on typewriters.
Remember typewriter? And anyway, so I thought, oh, I'm going to start kind of doing that. And then and I wanted the feeling of re-inputting them as opposed to scanning them.
Yeah.
And I found it really difficult, the process, because it was like you know, I just kept trying to fix them. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, that scene doesn't work. Oh, you know, it's like, no, that's not the project. The project is to like recount, you know, just like literally it's that entry. But I also found myself going, oh my gosh, like that idea, I've now developed it like so much further. You know what I mean? Like, but I was surprised. I was kind of surprised by certain things that I'd forgotten as a playwright that I was playing with and toying with, and even just some of the lines, I was like, oh, that line is like really cool, or oh, that line is awful, or whatever. You know what I mean? You start to have this encounter with yourself, and it's almost like listening to a song that you've written a long time ago or something. Like there's that sort of feeling, and I think that it's particularly odd because I think we're in a performance medium. So I think that compounded with this is like the plays that never made it to production. Do you know what I mean? Like there's like, you know what I mean? This stack of plays that never make it to production. And I feel such an ache for them. Do you know what I mean? I feel like, you know, not that I don't love the plays that have been produced, like yay, awesome. But I also feel like the ones that haven't, I feel such a responsibility toward them, and also heartbreak. Like they're really, really heartbreaking. Because some of them are my favorite plays.
Yeah. Well, I feel that way about My Baby, and there are people who have said to me, "Well, that was produced." I'm like, "No, it actually wasn't. It was workshopped to death
Mhm.
everywhere, but it never actually had a production." And there are definitely a few of them, or they had one. At least if some of them had one,
Right. No, I
but
know.
you know, um, because you talked about having published you published Out of Orbit, you published At the Speed of Jake, and Out of Orbit just got mentioned in this American Theater article this week about the slow plays,
Yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, I love that play. Like somebody else needs to do that play. Like it's just someone, somewhere. But it also just that sad thing. Like some of them you feel like you've graduated from, and it's okay to not have
Right.
another production of that.
Yeah.
Or it's just unlikely to have another production of that. Like it's too big. Like I think Last Savior is big now. Like I just don't see
Right.
who could do a play with 11 characters. Like who, you know.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like it's had this great run. I mean, it's a bummer, but it's okay. But then I feel like one out of like every 4 or 5 plays I write gets produced. And so the stacks are very uneven.
I know the stacks. It's just it's mind-boggling sometimes, and I think I don't know if there's an analogy to this to film because I know people write spec scripts all the times, right, and that they get made. But I can only imagine that's a different feeling somehow, or am I making that up? Does it feel different to write like 10 spec scripts as opposed to writing 10 plays that don't get produced?
Well, it's funny, like I definitely have a bunch of things I've been hired to write that haven't been produced, which at least I'm like, well, at least I got paid.
Right.
And um and then things that I have spec'd that, came close, never went. And I'll have this like deep affection for them. And then I kind of have to, and maybe it's just a factor of being older, like sometimes like, oh, I forgot I wrote that, because there's a lot. Like you're constantly trying to come out with product. And that's what you're like, the analogy would be like a play is to a spec script, right? Like the spec script is going to have something that has my heart in it and my soul in it. And not that I'm not going to put that into something someone hired me for, but if someone hires me for it, I'm trying to execute what they want.
Right.
And it's just somewhat different.
Yeah.
And if I sell something with a spec script, then I have the whole weird process of having to like let go. It's not going to be what I wrote once again.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm just that. I think there's this kind of. I think I can write more when I bounce between mediums because I can have a screenplay going and a play going. But like, it's hard for me to have 2 plays going.
Right.
Unless one is like we're in production rewrite stage, and one is like in an early, I'm just scribbling stage.
Yeah.
But yeah, the film thing is also like a different heartbreak because that's also I'm clear at this point. Like I'm very, very clear, and I'm clear about this with young playwrights. You're not gonna make a living writing plays.
Right.
But like the film stuff, you're doing that with this idea also, like you're writing a spec, but you also want to write something that's saleable. Because that's how you pay your rent, mortgage, insurance, etc.
Yeah.
But it is that thing for like younger playwrights. I'm like, do it if you want to do it, but know that you're going to be doing other things with your living. Because how many playwrights really make their living as playwrights?
I don't know any.
I don't have a very wealthy, high earning spouse. So,
Yeah.
and like, it's okay. I always just say like, it's not that playwriting's my hobby, but I don't have hobbies because I'm also a playwright. Like, there's just so many places you could put your career, right?
Right. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, and I think it's this interesting thing. Like, as we're growing older and as we have more, product behind us that we've created, like, what do you do with it? Like, I'm so happy that you published Out of Orbit feet of jade, because like they exist in this way, and people are using them in their classes, and people are, you know, like there's something they're not just in that ethereal way, an ephemeral way that people
Yeah, I'm obviously, you know, I'm a big believer in work and print, and having it find an audience that way, and future readers, and like whoever. There's also the mystery of like not knowing who the audience is, right? Like with books, you don't know who's going to pick it up, and like, you know, how they're going to engage with it. And that's such a delightful thing. And I also think that we have a history, at least in this country, of not really publishing plays all that much. You know, it's very limited, I would say. Even plays that have had multiple productions, for whatever reason, some of them don't get published, right, or even licensed. You know, so I think that yeah, my dedication to publishing has to do with expanding the work that is out there, and also just giving, you know, it may have a future life for that show, and it might be a production, or it might just be a reading, or it might just be a new audience member who'll be like, hey, I didn't know this play existed, this is amazing, right? You know, and I think that there's something beautiful about that, about discovering work. You know, because I think also, you know, this has something to do with our field, which I'll get to that question in a moment, which, you know, our field is very you know, it's the same 5 people. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you know, it goes in waves. It goes in waves. So it's like, you know, the same 5 names, and then the next same 5 names, and then the next 5 names. You know, and of course, pedagogically, if you think back, like then how that enters into training programs, for example, those students are only being exposed to the same 5 people, the same 10 people, right? So it's a vicious circle in a weird way, and nothing against the same 5 people or 10 people, right? You know, but it's more like, but it's system. It's a system, yeah.
Yeah, it is,
Yeah.
and also there's just kind of like I always say, like I would love it because now also your scripts kind of float around on the internet, and they have PDFs that are totally not the right date, and but like I kind of almost want, like, could there just be a bell that goes off like anytime someone reads my play, so I know that someone's actually reading the play, that's still out there, that people are still acknowledging it. I just found out someone had been using Last Seder, and this is like a very, very outdated draft. In some class, they're teaching about the psychology of family dynamics, and that she had been doing it for years, like since the production in DC, which is when my daughter was 6 months old. So now she's 21. Let's just put that. So and there's part of me that's like, that is amazing. How great is that? 2, that is not the most recent version. And 3, how come I'm not making any money off of that? Right. There's, you know, and also like, you know, bring me into the conversation, because I also feel like I don't know any writers who, if you're using their play in your class or something, would not be willing to come, and for not probably a lot of money, but like also just to be part of that conversation and hear how that audience is responding to what you wrote. So you know, it was kind of exciting, and then it was kind of like, wait, so who else is using it in something, or who else? And there was a student when I was teaching at USC. We were one of the plays we were doing was Jen Haley's The Nether, and we were talking, and then one of the students started talking about something, and I'm like, that's not in the play. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he had found, instead of buying it, he had found some PDF online that was a super early draft. It's also like those should explode at some point, right? Like you should be able to put an expiration date on them. Because it's not fair to the writer that someone is using that. And then like Jen kindly, I was like, this is what happened. Do you mind if we use this as an example of like, read both drafts, right? And see where play goes.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, it's hard to explain to people how you will rewrite a play. It's never done, right? Is it ever done?
No, it's never done. But sometimes you just move on. You go, okay. It's like, I'm over this one. This one, I'll leave it alone. Yeah.
I mean, every production of Last Seder, there was something that was it was a different iteration of the script because also times changed and it was a play that was set like in the now.
Right.
And even just laws changed, like gay marriage became legal and then illegal and then not, like there were different changes that I needed to make.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you date it and you make it a history play, right? Like you just decide.
Right.
It's set then or whatever, you write down the date and off it goes,
Yeah. That's what Eden became, right? Like Eden, which was very present about HIV in the late 90s, and now it's period piece.
Yeah.
I'm not changing that.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to sort of broaden the conversation. Obviously, we're still talking about the field, but also to just think about, we're in a particularly challenging time in the field for playwriting because our industry is in free fall. And it's feeling more precarious than I think it's felt in quite a long time. And I just wonder about, how you're keeping your hope, faith alive for this form and also the industry of which it's a part, but also not only for yourself, but also in your connection with other writers and other art makers in our industry.
So yeah, the free fall is something that is like in my nightmares every night, and I think I exist in like a little bit. It's somewhat like I know it, and then I'm in denial about it because otherwise, how do you function? And how do you? And I think there's something wrong with me because I will say like, okay, we're in free fall. I have enough unproduced plays that are enough current. Like I should do something else, and then I write a new play. So there's something about this is what I have to do. It would be like I had a former therapist who, when I would complain about the career, the life of a writer, he's like, I've never heard of your burning desire to be an actuary. And he's like, you don't do it, you don't burn for anything else. This is what you do. Just accept it. So I accept that I am writing a new play, even though I think it is useless to be writing a new play.
Despite everything, yes.
But also the place that gives me hope. I'm part of a group in LA called Playwrights Union, which was actually founded by Jen Haley. And it's just this consortium of 30 some odd playwrights, all who are at the moment based in LA and also work in film and television. And every February, because we picked the shortest month, there's an offer of doing a playwriting challenge where if you write a full-length play in a month. I wrote 8 nights during. It's like, and then I've also not successfully finished plays. I wrote a play last year called The Permutations, and I've got a play. And we did. So at the end of that month, we spend a weekend in various people's homes, or this year was the first time in homes years because we've been doing it on Zoom. And all the playwrights come. You don't get an excuse to not come unless you have like a small child. And we sit around and we read each other's plays. And this is the most I think that there had ever been. And so it was Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and it was the most hope-giving experience. This is why we do what we do. Everybody's work, even if it was 10 pages, some of them were 90 pages, some of and like it was just all so exciting and inspiring and fun, and it's theater, even if it's theater in someone's, sitting around someone's living room, reading this out loud, not printing out copies because now we, thousands of pages. And just the sheer excitement and energy of it. And then if you finish so if you have this month, I highly recommend this just as anyone's challenge. Like, I just think it makes you do it, right? Like, I think I would have put this off. And then if you do this new play reading weekend, then there are stage readings in June that you get to participate in. So, and then we also do like a pilot writing challenge in the fall and some other things. But this is the main. This is the most exciting one to me, and that's the thing that's kind of giving me hope, because I don't have much slated right now, and you have to kind of take the little things and be like, oh, this okay. I'm gonna, you know, soak in this section in American theater of an older play, and I'm gonna, and I'm telling everybody in the world about the yellow wallpaper screening. And that's exciting just because I can make it's anywhere. And
Yeah.
also they did such a beautiful job. So there's all those, all those things. So I think, like, I don't know what's happening anymore. Like and I'm too old to not be a playwright anymore. I mean, this is who I am. Like, I'm not pivoting to being an actor. There's nothing wrong with being an actor, but I can't act, so I don't think it's right for me. But like, it's there will be other forms. Like, yes, I do write film and TV, and I just finished my first novel during the strike, and we'll see what happens with that. But like, the theater is where I don't know how it was for you, but the first time I stepped into the theater, we were reading of Third Person, which was after during the like it was like the first thing that came up during the pandemic. We were about a year and a half in, and we all walked into the theater, and we all started crying. We were in our space that we hadn't been in, and I just I find it so precious, and I find it such a gift. Like, I can't take any of it for granted. And then I'm like, please, just more.
Yeah.
Happy more, please. So.
Yeah, totally. No, I hear you, and I think it's I just it does feel like yes, a friend of mine who's a playwright also talks about this. You're talking about this living room reading experience, right? So and they were saying that they treat each reading experience, even if it's in a salon setting or or a living room or however it functions, as an event. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing in a weird way. Like, instead of thinking about like, will the play ever be done in a theater? And you know what I mean? They're just like, I'm here for the reading, and the reading is the event, and I'm going to treat it as if it's a premiere. You know what I mean? And I think that, and I was like, oh, that's such a cool way of thinking about it, actually, because it frees you up a little bit, and it also, it doesn't feel like, this is going to sound odd, but I think that sometimes in these kind of living room reading situations or table situations, it's like, well, that's just a stepping stone for when I do the thing for real. Do you know what I mean? And I think, but actually, there's something beautiful about saying, no, this is real. This thing is also real, and it's not just a stepping stone.
Well, and how alive they can be. Like, it's interesting when you encounter an audience that is not as experienced with readings, and they're like, that was magical, that everything fell away. I could picture, they fill in all the blanks.
Yeah.
But there was Dow House did 2 readings of Yellow Wallpaper last August in their O'Neill Festival, and like this audience, and like I'm like, okay, it's hard to get audience. It's hard to get audience in LA for sure. I mean, 2 readings, one like in the middle of the day, packed, like 120 people in this. And they can't all be my friends. I don't have a lot of friends up at Danville, so I got like 5 people that are very close to that. And then the first reading we had a talk back. And the second reading, we did it. People were really upset that we didn't have a talk back. And they were in it. And they had and they also, like, there was this committee of women who kind of run this thing, who like came in and like decorated and had a whole like question thing that you could put a question on about, like, where you found solace during the pandemic and how you found it, and what, like, they made it into that event that I'm like, oh, it's just a reading. You know, what am I getting out of it to like improve the play? But like then I was like, no, this is an experience people are having, and they made it an experience from before the beginning of the play to after the end of the play. And I was so appreciative of it. And so like, and then I was like, it's a very little town. And I was walking around afterwards with a couple of friends who came and kept encountering people who had been at the reading. And it was like this little moment of fame. But it was so no, it shows me kind of also the, I mean, what is the essence of what we do? It's community, right? I mean, we're asking people to come and share a moment together, an extended moment together, is why I did do it. Being part of audience and sharing that with people and knowing that that collective experience is only that way, that once, that time, you know, during one of a play that goes on for years. And this is such a prime example of the community coming together and, you know, making it happen. Like they came in, like they all of a sudden they made a set, like they decorated the set with like all this, they hung up all this fabric and this yellow paper and this, like, you know, it was just were, it was great. And you know, I'm always kind of wowed at how people will elevate something that I'm not giving credit to, and I need to stop that. Like I need to stop it, you know, and experience the preciousness of it, and not be like, oh, it's another reading. You know,
Yeah, understood.
it is an experience, right? I mean, and that's the interesting thing about the streaming reading is I'm like, how are people experiencing? Because I don't know, because I'm not there.
Not there. I actually find streaming from an audience perspective fascinating, in the sense that it's closer, I think, to being a novelist. Do you know what I mean? Or a poet, because somebody is just having an experience with your work, and you don't know what it is, but they're having an experience with it, which is valid, right?
Right.
So and so I find that I actually find that kind of very moving. Like I'm like, oh, you know, it's like somebody reading a play. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I don't know who you are, but you're reading the play. You know,
Right.
like that's amazing. Who are you? I want to meet you. You know, like there's that beautiful thing that is that maybe you're not witness to, but that is witnessing itself by multiplying. And I also think that global access to the work is such a gift, right? It's so like my gosh, you know, somebody can watch your work from Dublin, or they can watch it from, you know, it's like,
Right.
which wouldn't happen otherwise, you know?
No, and I love it. And I love it particularly, I have to say I loved it particularly for Yellow Wallpaper because it works so well in that setting. And, you know, I mean, Amelia's streaming from her apartment, but it's perfect. And it's not a set, but it is a set.
Yeah.
And and there's something about the kind of how we've come to understand the cool immediacy of how Zoom works. Like we're in a different space with it than we were. I assume like 4 years ago today, I didn't even know what Zoom was. You know, the first experience I had with it is Abigail Solomon who produced Last Satyr off Broadway. We did a stream reading of Last Satyr for the Jewish Board's COVID fund. So that was one of like the first things. So it must have been, I think it was April. But that, because it was somewhere around Passover. And that was kind of the first online experience that I had of a play. And then I had relatives who had seen Broadway, and they were like, I kind of liked this better because it was more immediate. I could hear everything, and I wasn't, you know, so you don't know. Like, you don't know how people experience. I think it's harder now to tune into something that's streaming because you got over zoomed. But I mean, we watch TV.
Yeah.
We just have to you just kind of have to settle in. And then I wonder, like, I've seen some streamed plays, and I still wonder, like, what the best way to do them is, because I've seen them where, I mean, I don't want to name it because it feels like I'm being critical of the play, which I'm not, but like, they streamed it because they were cutting into actors. Like, it was streaming, but it was a live audience.
Mm-hmm.
Or instead of just one camera like stuck, right? They were doing it like it was a on people. But actors are performing for live audience and they're like shouting because they're shouting.
Of course they are.
And then I'm finding as I'm watching it, I'm like, why am I not liking this play that I know that I would like? Why am I? And then I happened to see the same play when I came out here, and I'm like, yeah, it was just about. It was about the fact that it needed to be camera and boom,
Mm-hmm.
and not. It had to be proscenium as opposed to like close up.
Right. Yeah. I'll give a shout out to. I have no skin in the game, but have you seen the Waitress stream?
Beautiful. Oh my God.
It's actually one of the best directed performance captures that I've seen in a very, very long time. I'm really interested in performance capture, and because I think it's a skill, directors who know how to do this well. And I felt like that one, and I've seen many, NT at home, NT live, like, I'm all over it. But this one it was just so sensitive to the material, and it was on stage with the actors, and I was just like, I hadn't seen anybody do that before, and it was really beautiful.
It was so masterful, and I really hope that I know that they released it for a brief time, and I'm hoping that they keep it out and keep bringing it back.
I hope so.
I don't know why it was so brief. But it was just so good.
It was so good, and it actually had that feeling. I'm sure maybe you saw it. I'm not sure if you did, but I make no assumptions. But Spike Lee, recorded. It did a performance capture of American Utopia, the David Byrne concert experience, and it was on. I think it was on one of the streaming services, and he did something similar there, where the camera was on stage with the dancers, and they were like, and sometimes we were backstage or we were in the wings, and I was like, yeah, like that's how you do it. You actually give us something that we would normally not see,
right?
And we don't have.
Like, expose it that it's a theater. Don't pretend it's something else.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
But no, that was the Waitress. I was so happy that it was so gorgeous.
Yeah.
I could have watched it 10 times in a row.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was so luscious. It was just luscious, and I felt love from the camera. You know what I mean? I thought the camera was just like, I love you, this musical, and I was like, yeah, that's how you do it. Instead of being a clinical experience, like the camera's a clinical apparatus, it was more like the camera is really in simpatico with this work. And I don't see that very often. So I just say that that's one way to do it. That kind of makes it work. Yeah.
Well, and also because, there's that thing where you have a production that is like, sings in your heart and then it's gone. And all you have is like the little archival video that you're never supposed to show anybody.
Yeah.
And that is the beauty and the heartbreak of theater, is that you can't show it to people, and that if you do show it to somebody with that little camera stuck in the back one, it just never is quite right, because it's a whole new, like, I don't know who the better person is to direct these, whether it's a theater director or whether it's a film director.
Yeah.
But it has to be somebody who understands that this is on a stage and doesn't want to hide it.
Correct. Yeah. And also, I think that there's something about actually loving theater. Like, you know what I mean? Like, coming at it from somebody who actually really enjoys the medium.
Yeah.
Even if they're translating it to film, I think that makes a huge difference. And which seems like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised. I will say that we're going to almost wrap up soon. I just wanted to remark as a tag end to this that I was talking to a playwright who did a performance capture of their show on Broadway, but they're stuck in limbo with distribution for that performance capture. And one of the things that she said to me was like, it's important that people see what we do. You know what I mean? Because people don't know what we do, especially with a play. They might have an idea of what a musical is. Do you know what I mean? Because that has so much commercial access usually. But with plays, often, I mean, it's a niche market. Like so it's
More
like
and
people
more every day.
more and more niche, more and more, and it's like literally, it's like, yeah, this is an opportunity to show people what we do, which is such a beautiful thing.
A lot of transparency in theater about like what it's about and how we're involved, and I think the job of a playwright is this odd place, right? Because you've created something that technically doesn't need you to be there, but does need you to be there. And people don't kind of understand that, like, you want to be at rehearsal. Like, yes, I need to see how the play is working. There may be a time when I'm ready to like let it go. And sure, if there's productions all over the country, I'm not going to whine about it. But like, there's a certain, I feel like you need to be at much of the rehearsal for like the first 5 productions.
Yeah.
And because I invariably, if I haven't been, watching, like, oh no, no, no. But also just even when I talk about like the transparency of how people are paid, or the transparency of like Todd London's great book about that, and it's a world, I think, that interests people, but they also don't know.
Yeah.
And it's it's like, and then as an audience member, like, I feel like they should know, and also like, look at what they did. They just gave us our time, their time and attention. Like, they are also a gift, and they are an integral, and they don't even know that really what they are is an integral part of the play. And that's, I thought that was something that waitress screen did beautifully, beautifully well. Right? Like, I felt like we were included as an audience in a way that is really hard to do.
Yeah, we will leave it at that. It is really hard to do. Our job is really hard. Thank you, everyone who's tuning in to the series, Conversations from the Alcove from the Lucille Lortel Theater. Check us out on YouTube, either this season or prior seasons or seasons to come, hopefully. A place for playwrights to talk about craft, their art, a space to lift it up, and just keep following what we're doing here at the Alcove. And I will now hit stop recording, but I will stay online with Jen to say my formal goodbyes. Take care.
Thank you.